All right, so in this video, we're going to look at completion percent invoicing. We'll have a look at how the invoices get created and how they kind of stack on each other. We'll have a look at the terms and conditions, the statement that you can use and how it relates specifically to this type of invoicing. We'll also look at retention, which is an option on the completion percent type of invoicing. So into my account over here, I'm going to first of all go to an estimate that's not yet been turned into a job and go create job, and then talk you through what is the completion percent style as opposed to the other ones here. So completion percent is still based on this idea of a fixed contract. So in that way, it's very, very similar to contract price. The main difference is that contract price allows you to make kind of lump sum milestone claims to the client. So 20% on deposit, 20% on base, whatever the percents are, but they're stages that are kind of set out in advance. Completion percent is more based on a regular invoicing cycle. So you could be billing monthly or you could be billing fortnightly, and each invoice you're telling the customer how much of the project is being completed, and hence we take the dollar value from you saying, hey, I've done like 20% of plaster, and plaster was $10,000 total, so the invoice this month is $2,000. So it's drawing down on each of the cost categories. We have the option to do retention, which I'm going to come back to in a moment, but for now I'm going to jump into a job that already is up and running with the completion percent invoicing working, and we're going to talk about a few little things that are unique to this style of invoicing, and then look at how you create the invoice, how you edit them, etc. So the first thing to note is on the idea that each invoice draws down. You'll see I've got a deposit invoice already, which has been received. Client's paid it. If I go to the August invoice, you will see two things. Number one, that idea of showing the cost category and then essentially drawing out of that amount. So if we look at plaster, for an example, I've said we want to bill 50% of the total, so 50% of that, and it works out what that amount is. If we look at this preliminaries one in specific, you can see that the previous invoice, which was the deposit, I billed 40% of this already, so it's already taken $480 out of that $1,200. And if I say bill another 40%, that's 40% of the total. So overall, between those two claims, we will have billed 80% of the preliminaries. One nuance, because each invoice is based on the last, is I can't go back and edit the deposit. Even if I change the status, I can't go back and edit the dollar figures. So one thing to just be aware of is once you create an invoice, the prior one is locked, because we rely on that invoice not changing because we're using the dollar figure that you billed previously to work out how much is already taken out of a particular category. Awesome. So let's mark this one as received. And if this is your first time coming across the invoicing section in Build Exact at all, quick note: the status is here, which I will cover more in a second. This received one is me indicating that I've received the funds, and I could receive partial amounts. I could receive the full amount. Typically, I would recommend people make notes as well, whether it be, a transaction number, or it could be a check number if they pay that way. It could be whatever is relevant to that transaction. But let's mark that as received. Let's create the next one, and you'll see it's got, as we mentioned, the drawn down amounts already. So I'm going to say this is my October invoice now. In fact, August, September it should be. September. And I've got a remaining balance of $240 for preliminaries. This little green arrow is just the shortcut to say bill whatever's left. I can absolutely go and click on these and look at the fact that I've done 20%, which was the deposit. Let's say the windows are now delivered. I want to bill the balance of 80%. So you're building it up just like this. We do absolutely have people who compare this to the schedule and the completion on each category. And if you're going to do that, the only real point is when you're looking at them, think about this as cumulative. So, we've billed 40% already, we've billed another 40%. So if you're comparing it to your schedule, then you would imagine preliminaries on the schedule would be at 80% so far. So use this value to compare against the total category if you're going to be doing a direct comparison that way. We absolutely have some other users who just go, hey, I expensed another, say, $1,000 on a category this month, and hence that's what I'm adding. But it's a bit personal preference how you actually want to arrive at these figures. An extra point here, in this project, I had some variations, and in completion percent invoicing, all variations sit separate in their own kind of grouping. The reason for that is the cost categories we're looking at. This is what was originally budgeted in the estimate, and hence, as a variation comes in, we don't adjust that category. We set it off to the side so that we get this really clean kind of understanding of what was the original budget, how much have we done so far, and then variation just covers all the side add-ons. Same thing, you can draw these down as like a half claim or a whole claim, just depends what you want to do. Now, before I go and share this, I'm just going to make a quick mention to the fact that we have terms and conditions up in here, and this will appear on the bottom of the invoice. As covered in other invoicing videos, the main thing that people are editing here is to add payment terms, but absolutely change this to what suits you. So for example, new accounts are actually worded a bit differently. This is an older account where it's got invoices must be paid within 10 days. The newer accounts must be paid by due date. But just an example, you can change whatever you want on this to make it suit your business better. Now let's go and share this. And this is another thing that you can do on any invoicing type, but we see it more commonly on completion percent than other types. That is that you can issue the invoice and decide not to mark it as invoiced. So what that means is, if I go back to this one, it's currently in a pending status, and if I print it, it'll show as a progress claim, and it's listed as a draft. You can absolutely share it like this, or you can share it as invoiced. The case, or I suppose why we see the difference on this style more than others is we'll have situations where people are doing like a commercial project, and month on month they deliver their claim. That gets not negotiated, but discussed with the client. The client might go, hey, I don't think you've done this much of a particular category, and there's more this back and forth. If that's your scenario, issuing it as pending is much, much better, because you have those discussions before you actually set a due date and arrive on the final total. It also lessens the chance that you will create another invoice because this one's still pending, and hence lock yourself out of this, as we talked about before with each invoice building on the last. So if I'm going to share, we've covered off what this means. Set it as invoiced or leave it as pending, up to you. You can share the invoice on its own or the statement or both together. So I'm going to go and share this to, I'll say no to the client portal, send it to myself. As with most of the share flows, I'm sure you're quite familiar. If you've been watching other videos, you can adjust the email, you can adjust who it goes to, add extra attachments, etc. But if I'm sharing this out and I'm deciding to attach the statement, I want to show you quickly what that actually looks like and why it's useful in this style of invoicing. So the statement is really here to just show the client a summary of what's happened so far. So in completion percent invoicing, where you're not really laying the claims out in advance like you would a contract price job, it's showing really just what's happened so far, how much variation value is attached to each invoice, whether you've received the funds or whether whether it's invoiced and still owing. I also really like that it lists out the variations so the client will see kind of what's happened. Note that we show all variations here with the exception of pending ones. So as soon as it's sent to the client, Even if it gets rejected, it'll still list here so that the client has that summary. Now, lucky last, let's do a quick overview of the retention part of it if you need this function. So back into an estimate, creating this as a completion percent job. Note you can do retention on contract price too, just as a side point. So when I'm doing retention, what I'm saying is when I issue an invoice, hold back a certain amount of it. And these two boxes here work out, first of all, how much to hold per invoice, and then how much to hold back total. If this is something that you do in your business, I'm sure you're quite aware of it already because it's generally written into contracts. But what it's looking at is, like, what's the total amount of the contract I'm holding back? So 5% of the total amount. And the reason we have the option to choose how much per invoice is we get people that front load this. So they'll say, let's claim a 10% per invoice up until a 5% total. And that means that the retention is really largely taken out in the early invoices. And when they get later in the job, potentially when cash is a bit tighter, they're not subtracting any further retention. That said, do whatever you want as far as what's matching your contract and what suits your style. So you could have 5 and 5 and it would come off equally off all claims. Choose whether you want the retention to be taken out of variations as well. And a side note, if you say excluding variations during the job, you can switch it to including, but you can't go backwards. And the logic of that is if there's going to be, let's say, a discussion with the client where they thought it was including, it wasn't, you can switch it on, but the client, I guess, in our opinion, will rarely look to hold less retention. So we've made it that it can go up, but not down. Let's go create job, and I'll quickly put a few invoices together. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to make them rather large invoices. So we'll just go that one, invoice 1, and all of that invoiced. Once our market is invoiced, it realizes, if you like, the retention, and hence we've got this total amount. If I wasn't doing it as such a large lump sum, you would see this grow invoice by invoice. And what happens is if I was to get to the point in my contract where I can claim this back from the client, I would go ahead and add the retention invoice. So think of this almost as its own little side pot of money where it's sitting off to the side and you can invoice back from it as you need to. So we'll just say completion. Again, if this is something that you need to use, you probably already know that you need it, and you'll be aware of the when you can claim it back type questions. We often see a setup where it's like, hey, after 6 months you can claim 50%. After a year you can claim another 50% back from the client. So when you're setting it up, I'm thinking that you'll know what values to put in here. Let's send this out and invoice it, and you get this. You can see pretty clearly how we're just taking out of this pot of money and it has a balance left for us. Final point to this is if you have retention on and you're using the invoice statement, as we talked about a second ago, we get this little box down here as a bonus, down on the right here, literally just talking, kind of confirming with the client how much we've held back. And as we start to dip into that fund to invoice them for it, how much of that we've invoiced, how much is still holding, etc. Lovely. Hopefully that makes sense. As always, reach out with questions and we'll leave you to it. Thank you.